A gun collector and dealer allegedly stole arms from police and then sold them on to Western Cape gangsters.
They were the men entrusted with the tools of death. Colonel Christian Prinsloo and Colonel Donovan Naidu were senior officers in the South African Police Service. They wore the uniform, swore the oath, and held positions of immense trust within the very system designed to protect citizens from harm. For years they walked the corridors of power in Pretoria, their authority unquestioned. Prinsloo was a respected firearms expert, a veteran of 35 years, the man who knew the life cycle of a gun from seizure to destruction. Naidu was his colleague, the one tasked with the final act, melting down confiscated weapons into oblivion. Together, they were the gatekeepers, the final line of defense, ensuring that illegal firearms would never again fall into the wrong hands and spill blood on the streets of South Africa. But behind the facade of duty and the crispness of their uniforms, a darkness was taking root. These two men, these guardians of the state's arsenal, looked upon thousands of firearms, pistols, revolvers, and rifles slated for the furnace, and saw a river of cash. They would meticulously plan and execute one of the most devastating gun smuggling operations in the country's history, a scheme that would arm the very gangs they were supposed to be fighting. The story that unfolded was not a simple case of theft. It was a calculated and systematic subversion of justice, a perversion of the police service's core mission. The scheme was born from a toxic mix of expertise and desperation. Colonel Chris Prinsloo was the mastermind, the firearms guru who supervised the documentation of weapons destined for destruction at a police storage facility in Silverton, Pretoria. He knew precisely how to make a gun disappear from the official record. His colleague, Colonel Donovan Naidu, faced mounting financial problems. He allegedly saw the vast cache of weapons under their control not as a public menace to be neutralized but as a personal gold mine. The proceeds would fund a comfortable lifestyle, a chillingly mundane reason for unleashing such widespread terror. Their method was deceptively simple, exploiting the very protocols designed to prevent such theft. Prinsloo would manipulate the inventory lists, marking certain firearms as destroyed when in reality, they were being set aside. These were not random weapons. He carefully selected high-quality pistols and revolvers that would fetch a high price in the criminal underworld. Naidu's role was to oversee the physical destruction process. He ensured that the guns selected by Prinsloo never made it to the smelting furnaces. Instead, they were discreetly packaged and hidden, ready for their journey from a secure police facility into the hands of ruthless gangsters. Between 2007 and 2015, this deadly production line operated with chilling efficiency. The scale of their operation was staggering. Over 8 years, Prinsloo and Naidu managed to steal and sell more than 2,000 firearms. The stolen arsenal was sold for an estimated 9 million rand into a sophisticated trafficking network. The primary buyers were middlemen who knew exactly where the demand was highest, the gang-infested neighborhoods of the Western Cape. Prinsloo later confessed to living off the profits of this bloody trade for 2 years, a stark admission of how deeply he had immersed himself in his criminal enterprise. To ensure the guns could not be traced back to their source, the serial numbers were often ground off. The Pretoria pipeline, managed by 2 of the state's own colonels, was now fully operational, pumping a steady supply of lethal weapons directly into the heart of South Africa's most violent conflicts, all driven by the simple, corrosive force of human greed. The journey of the stolen firearms from the police stores in Pretoria to the streets of the Western Cape was a well-oiled machine of death. The syndicate did not deal directly with street-level gangsters. Instead, they used intermediaries, shadowy figures who bridged the gap between the corrupt police officers and the brutal gang lords. Key figures like Vereeniging arms dealer Alan Raves and Cape Town businessman Irshad Hunter Lair were allegedly central to this network. Raves was accused of orchestrating the deals, while Lair, a man who owned family-friendly restaurant franchises, was accused of trafficking the weapons to the gangs. Deals were allegedly struck in the most mundane of places, a chilling juxtaposition of suburban life and underworld conspiracy. Once the guns reached the Western Cape, they were distributed among the myriad gangs fighting for control of the Cape Flats. This sudden, massive influx of high-quality firearms fundamentally changed the balance of power on the streets. Gangs armed with these Prinsloo guns gained a deadly advantage over their rivals, leading to an immediate and catastrophic escalation in violence. The weapons were used to enforce drug territories, to carry out assassinations, and to intimidate entire communities. The police, already struggling to contain gang warfare, were now unknowingly fighting against their own stolen arsenal. The arrival of the Prinsloo guns correlated directly with a dramatic spike in murder rates and violent crime across areas like Manenberg, Mitchell's Plain, and Hanover Park. The betrayal was complete, its consequences written in the bloodstains on the pavement. Behind every statistic is a story of unbearable loss. Consider the story of Leanna Van Wyck. In 2012, at just 6 years old, she was playing near her home when a stray bullet from a gang fight struck her in the head. The bullet, fired from a Prinsloo gun, did not kill her, but it condemned her to a life of profound suffering. She was left severely brain damaged, unable to walk, talk, or care for herself. Her future, once filled with the limitless potential of childhood, was erased in an instant. Leanna's silenced voice is one of the most powerful testaments to the scandal's human cost. Then there is the family of Dudley Richards, a man from Mitchell's Plain. In 2013, he was shot and killed. Years later, his family would learn the devastating truth. The gun that ended his life was one of the thousands trafficked by Prinsloo and his accomplices. His death was not just a random act of violence, it was a direct consequence of corruption at the highest levels of the police service. The families of other victims, like Dylan Cornelius from Manenberg and Lucas Dirks, who was killed in January 2015, share this same story of loss, tainted by betrayal. Their names are etched into the history of this scandal, representing countless others whose stories remain untold. These individual tragedies paint a harrowing picture of a community under siege. How do you explain to a child that their father was killed by a gun that came from the police? These are the impossible questions that the victims' families have been forced to confront. While communities on the Cape Flats were drowning in a sea of violence, a dedicated team of Western Cape detectives began to notice a disturbing pattern. Major Generals Jeremy Veery and Peter Jacobs, leaders of a special anti-gang unit known as Operation Combat, saw that the weapons being recovered from crime scenes were different. They were often high-quality, professionally altered firearms, with serial numbers expertly removed. These were not the makeshift guns typically associated with street gangs. A sinister question began to form in their minds. Where was this steady stream of professional weaponry coming from? They suspected a leak from an official source, a terrifying possibility that suggested a traitor within their own ranks. Their investigation was painstaking and fraught with danger. For years, Veery, Jacobs and their team worked tirelessly, chasing down leads, analyzing ballistics reports and piecing together a puzzle of immense complexity. They operated in a climate of fear, where witnesses were reluctant to talk and the threat of reprisal from powerful gangs was ever present. They meticulously tracked the guns, building a database that linked crime scenes across the Western Cape. Slowly but surely, the evidence began to point north, over 1,000 kilometers away, to the police's central firearms storage and destruction facility in Pretoria. The breakthrough came in early 2015. Armed with enough evidence to secure a warrant, the Operation Combat team prepared for a daring move. On the 16th of January 2015, they traveled to Pretoria and raided the home of Colonel Chris Prinsloo. The respected firearms guru was caught completely by surprise. Inside his house, the detectives found exactly what they were looking for: illegal firearms, ammunition, and 120,000 rand in cash. The evidence was undeniable. Faced with the mountain of proof meticulously assembled by Veery and Jacobs' team, the 35-year police veteran's facade crumbled. The man who had orchestrated the flow of death for years finally confessed to his crimes. Prinsloo's confession was the key that unlocked the entire conspiracy. He detailed the methods, the timelines, and the names of his accomplices, including his colleague Donovan Naidu and the alleged middlemen like Raves and Leher. The dedicated and relentless police work of Operation Combat had paid off. They had exposed a rot that went to the very heart of the South African police service. Their investigation was a testament to the fact that even within a compromised system, there were still officers committed to the true meaning of justice. They had followed the truth no matter how uncomfortable or where it led, successfully unmasking the cops who had turned into the country's most dangerous criminals. With Chris Prinsloo's confession, the syndicate's house of cards began to collapse. In June 2016, Prinsloo pleaded guilty to a raft of charges, including racketeering, corruption, and theft. In exchange for becoming a state witness against his former partners in crime, he was sentenced to an 18-year prison term. His conviction sent shockwaves through the nation, confirming the public's worst fears about police corruption. His downfall marked the first major victory for the investigators and the victims, but the legal battle was far from over. The focus then shifted to the alleged middlemen, Irshad Hunter Layer and Alan Raves. In 2016, Raves' lawyer, Nouruddin Hassan, was murdered in a targeted shooting outside his home. 2 years later, in 2018, Layer's high-profile lawyer, Pete Mihalik, was assassinated in a brazen attack while dropping his child at school. These brutal killings were widely seen as attempts to intimidate and derail the prosecution, demonstrating the deadly stakes involved in holding the syndicate accountable. Despite the violence and numerous legal delays, prosecutors persisted. Layer, the businessman who owned family restaurants, and Raves, the Vereeniging arms dealer, were ordered by a Western Cape High Court judge in 2021 to finally stand trial. They faced a battery of serious charges, including racketeering and theft, which could result in life sentences if they are convicted. Laher was released on 100,000 rand bail, but the legal proceedings against him and Raves continue to grind slowly forward, a testament to the complexity and gravity of their alleged crimes. The Prinsloo scandal did more than just expose the crimes of a few individuals. It ripped the cover off a culture of systemic corruption and institutional failure within the South African police service. The fact that two senior colonels could operate a massive gun-running scheme for 8 years from under the nose of their superiors points to a catastrophic breakdown in oversight, accountability, and basic security protocols. In a move that stunned and outraged observers, the very heroes who uncovered the scandal were themselves targeted by police management. Just before Prinsloo's sentencing in 2016, Major Generals Jeremy Veery and Peter Jacobs, the leaders of Operation Combat, were suddenly and controversially sidelined. They were demoted and transferred from their roles in the Western Cape, a decision widely seen as punishment for exposing corruption that reached high into the police hierarchy. This action sent a chilling message to other honest officers. Exposing the rot from within would not be rewarded, but punished. The fallout from this internal political maneuvering has been devastating for anti-corruption efforts within SAPS. This long shadow of corruption continues to undermine public trust in the police. That's all for this episode. Let us know your thoughts and comments. As always, be safe, stay blessed, and don't forget to subscribe.